Pastor Park, you are our junior person on the panel. I'm afraid to ask you how old you are. Oh, you're 40. Okay, that's not too bad. You're about 4 years off from my children, so at least I'm holding on. That's okay. From your perspective and your generation, some of us lived through the civil rights movement. Some of us were children during that time. The violence was appalling. And the Huffington Post did an incredible piece of comparing Ferguson, what was going on in Alabama. Go online, you could see it. It's August 14th. And it showed the comparisons of how things stay the same, yet they are not changed at all. When you see this kind of violence on television, and you are a man of faith, being a pastor, what does it say to you and your generation?
So I think I read somewhere that one of the most violent things about our society and culture is the speed of it. The way we deal with people, the lack of patience, the unwillingness to stay and hear one another's stories, to bear one another's burdens, we just simply do not have the time for. Even in a technological age, our devices and our technology were supposed to work for us so that we would have more time. But our relationships being increasingly shallow, that speed causes violence in and of itself. And I think of it as Dr. Webb, you were saying, that our public theology, do we have the courage, do we even have the patience to make it a less violent world? 1 John 4 says that perfect love casts out fear. We don't have the time for even improvised love, temporary love. We don't even have the time for momentary love. And so we cannot cast out fear, even temporarily. We live in a constant state, and I think that our technology and our speed, the rapidity of our daily lives, our inability to wait on one another and to even be a definition of community that understands we call it a beloved community, but we don't take the time to love our communities, to know our communities, to know one another. Even within the families, there's a lot of breakdown and barriers that we have not addressed, don't have the time to reflect on, and therefore the violence continues even within ourselves. We don't love each other, we don't love the people in our homes, and therefore we don't love ourselves. We don't love ourselves. And how can we do any work against violence without that kind of deep work?
I think that's an important point, and very eloquently said as a man of God. We have a situation today where faith is somehow minimized. And people of faith, because they don't believe it's logical, I get it all the time, being a minister and being a judge. One who is analytical must use evidence and empirical data in order to make decisions, yet believing that there is a God that there may not be the answers for, looking at scripture that talks about those things that are not seen and believing them to be so just because God says it's so. How then do we take a civilization here in America, in Western culture, we incarcerate more people than even Russia and other Eastern countries? That is our solution. How do we merge the faith community with trying to deal with a problem that people believe can be solved with not love, not compassion, not about self-worth, but more data, continuing to lock people up because that's the only solution, because they're animals anyway, and they don't deserve to be out in our community. Dr. Cynthia Hale, tell us about that from your perspective as a woman who is a woman of faith, and yet your sermons are rooted in sound doctrine. What can we do as faith leaders to help bridge the gap as to what we're doing in this country with locking so many people up with violence?
That is a great question, and thank you for asking me that. The first thing we can do is pray. The Bible makes clear that if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray. And that's the beginning, because prayer changes people, it changes circumstances, it changes things. And then we have to preach And that doesn't just mean preaching from the pulpit, but speaking prophetically to the issues that are confronting us. If we're talking about violence, then we must preach about violence. And in so many of our pulpits, we talk about prosperity. We talk about things that make people happy, make people feel good. But how can we see ourselves as prosperous when people all around us are dying or being incarcerated, or women are being raped and children are being trafficked in our communities? And so then we have to practice what we preach. If this sounds like a sermon, I think that way. But I'm just giving you some practical points. Practicing what we preach is then living it out as the church and as the people of God. And David said it begins even in our homes. Practicing justice, whatever makes for another person's highest good, in our homes, on our jobs, in our communities, in our churches, at the barbershop, at the nail shop, sometimes just walking down the hall. How about speaking to people? When we began to see each other as human beings. See, I think what was going on in that classroom, one young lady said on CNN, she didn't even know the name of the girl who was being attacked. They're in class together. That's not so strange. We don't know our next door neighbors. We go to church and don't know the people we're sitting next to. Do you know the person who's sitting next to you right now? It's taking time to get to know. Now everybody's gonna get to know one another.
Okay, everybody turn to somebody and tell them your name. Say, neighbor, I'm glad to see you here today.
Look it up.
Because this is the day that the Lord had made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Come on, y'all gonna clap now. We don't do it if we don't do it right. All right. That was such a wonderful, I'm gonna remember that whenever I either moderate or do a panel. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor. Thank you for that, Pastor. I think that one of the, and I'm going to turn to Dr. Sherry on this because we're going to talk about the mental health perspective, but when you watch these reality shows, and I had a court show, it's airing in parts of Africa now and Eastern Europe. I made sure not to do a script, dehumanize anyone. That's probably why it's still not on in America. Because if you watched it, you knew what was going on in that courtroom without knowing what was going on. And it was to uplift and build. I did everything but cite the scripture, but I certainly used it. People want to matter.
Yes. That's right.
And so now they're on Facebook showing you what meal they prepared for the day.
That's true.
When they're going outside, it's like holding up a sign outside of your house telling the burglar, come burglarize my house because I'm on my way to Florida.
Right.
We show our outfits and our new hairdos because we want to matter.
That's it.
And so television plays a role in that. We believe that in order to get ratings or in order to be noticed, we've got to deal with pushing that envelope because there's a fear that we will become irrelevant.
That's right.
And in our bad behavior, we're becoming irrelevant. That's why the forces that be don't take some groups seriously, because of the way that we behave. And so we will become extinct and annihilated because of our inability to stand up and say, this is not appropriate. From the mental health perspective, what are the root causes? Because I think it's all birth in fear of wanting to matter so much that you'll do any and all manner of things, even if it means you sacrifice your womanhood and your community. That's why Atlanta is the #1 place for sex trafficking. Those men can't do it without women helping them. So we'll sacrifice another sister out of fear of being irrelevant or needing to matter. What are the root causes that makes that tie that helps to hurt our community?
You know, that's a good question. Everyone wants to matter, and everybody does matter. What we're seeing with social media, they have a way of putting it out there now. Everybody, everybody has a way of putting it out. I don't care if it's the meal, I don't care how they look or whatever, because it's an issue, a sense of self-esteem. One of the things in terms of TV, it shapes, and it's been doing this for many years. This is nothing new. The difference is we see everybody doing it now because we do have social media. The issue is that TV, magazines, they shape our belief system. It's very powerful. The media is extremely powerful. That's why when you see violence every day, you have a certain mindset.
Yeah.
When you see how other people living, you have an issue, well, maybe I should be living like that. I do reality TV too. Some people may have seen me on the Braxtons, some people may have seen me on the Housewives. The reason I chose to do that is because I want to use that platform to help people understand that mental health is health. And I don't care what your issue is, I don't care what the problem is, let's look at it in terms of getting help. It is okay to get help. One of the things that has happened, I want to just touch very slightly in terms of the church, we have become a people of reaction. We don't think, we just respond.
Right.
And because we respond, we don't understand what the problem is. A lot of times we try to get a solution and we don't know where the root of the problem is. And so until we stop and understand some of the issues that are contributing to the problem, nothing's gonna change because we keep throwing things out there that's not gonna stick. It's like throwing stuff against a wall and you say, let's try that, let's try this, let's lock them up, let's do this. We have to understand why those kids sit there. We have to understand why that teacher stood there. Fear is a big cause of it. But we have to understand beyond that, and you do start by talking to one another. And we don't talk to one another, and you don't know who's beside you because of issues of rejection and fear, and maybe they don't want to be bothered. It is not always like it used to be. We used to not have the options of connecting with people like we do, but we connected because people were there. And now with everybody being so mobile, everybody into their own little world, we are fearful of how people view us. And so you don't know if that person you speak to, they're going to look at you and say, what you talking about? Why you speak? And now we have a society where we've had children raising children.
Yes.
So we have lost a sense of value. We don't have a core of who we are. And so until we know who we are, we don't know how to respond. So what we do is react.
Yes.
And that's a problem. And it goes back to sense of self.